Hello and welcome into the Take 10 podcast. This is Alex Roux of Big Ten Network, and today's guests are Olivia Dekker, sports reporter for Big Ten Network and ESPN, and Harold Shelton, Big Ten Network manager of research. Let's get into it.
Take a look, listen, and enjoy. Look at here.
With the catch, the finish!
Oh, my goodness!
What a catch!
Oh,
Energy,
my goodness.
enthusiasm. It's picked off! Selfish! Brilliant!
He's still going! Touchdown!
All right, we'll get to our first guest, Olivia Dekker, in just a moment. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Northwestern University's School of Professional Studies. If you've ever thought about a career in sports, check out the master's program in sports administration at Northwestern University. You can build your skill set and your network in evening or online classes. Find out more at sps.northwestern.edu/sports. Really good opportunity there for anyone who's looking to get into the industry, work at a place like Big Ten Network. Check out that master's program. Shout out, as always, to Northwestern SPS for sponsoring the show. All right, real quick intro to Olivia Dekker. The name is likely familiar if you follow Big Ten sports and follow Big Ten basketball. Her husband is Sam Dekker, who played for Wisconsin, led in the back-to-back Final Fours. But Olivia is a big name in sports as well. She is a reporter for Big Ten Network. It can be seen on ESPN, sideline reporting as well. She's all over the place on social media and is a well-known reporter and person in the sports media industry. So we talk about her background, getting into her career, getting into some funny stories about her husband Sam, some memorable moments from both their careers, and talking a little bit about her dad as well, Kevin Harlan, who is also a well-known broadcaster for NBA on TNT, CBS, Westwood One. So huge sports family. And Olivia Dekker is right at the center of it, and we talk a lot of different sports angles in the next 45 minutes, so I think you'll enjoy it. And let's get to it. It is a Take 10 podcast discussion with Olivia Dekker. All right, I'm very pleased to be joined by someone who has worked for a wide range of places as a reporter and a host, still relatively early in her career, including Fox Sports, ESPN. With us at Big Ten Network, it's Olivia Dekker. Olivia, how are you?
I'm good, Alex. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. It was a couple months ago now that we last worked together in person at the Big Ten tournament, masked up, testing for COVID between games. So I think we've come a long way, since that, and the world is looking up and sports are looking up. It looks like everything's coming back. So how is life treating you right now, and how are you spending your time in kind of this off season?
Really good. My off season right now actually just began yesterday because I do host a podcast for BetMGM, and we do that weekly. And last week was our 10th and final episode of that deal. And I think they're extending us. So right now I'm kind of on like a tentative vacation, and usually summers I have off because I do football and basketball. So I kind of have a teacher schedule, I always tell people, which is sweet because so does my husband because he's off in the summers. So right now we are in Kansas City, and we're just like up to our eyeballs in house projects, which we're really enjoying, but it is so different to shift gears of like away from work and sports and flights and travel. And now we just kind of get to be homebodies, and we are enjoying it so much.
Yeah, definitely going to get into some of the lifestyle coverage on social media in a little bit here, because I know you're really into that. But also, I like that you use the term like school schedule, because when I graduated and got a job at Big Ten Network, and nothing really changed as far as like the academic calendar. I still kind of have the summers much lighter. So I kind of still live in that summer break lifestyle. So
just never work in baseball. That's the trick.
Exactly. 162, and it's April to October. So
yeah.
Glad you brought up your podcast. When I was doing some scouring of your social media profiles, saw you're hosting one called Unleashed, like you referenced, and really cool opportunity, it seems like. I mean, talking to CJ McCollum, Chad Ochocinco, Adam Lefko, and then I just saw today Richard Jefferson. So take me through that experience, kind of maybe take me through some of the highlights and cooler people you've got to talk to, and just the entire project overall.
Yeah, that's kind of the great thing about this business. And this is why you have an agent, because they'll handle all this stuff. And I don't know what comes across this desk that he decides is not for me or what is for me. Probably better, I don't know. But this one took me by surprise because I was like, man, I don't know. I've never hosted a podcast. I've been guests on podcasts like this. What kind of guests are we going to get? Is it, worth my precious off season that I'm like holding on to so tightly? And what kind of sold it for me is I was going over to be with Sam in Turkey, and my agent said, you can do this from Turkey. I thought, okay, done deal. That sounds really cool. This, again, I'm not working games after the Big Ten tournament was my last assignment. And I thought this is perfect. So it's been a lot of fun, and our guests have been amazing. Just finishing last week, I guess this week, with Richard Jefferson, who was maybe my favorite. Chad Ochocinco was so much personality. It was like almost hard to interview him because you just have to stay out of his way. And, more guests, you have to like keep pulling. And so I don't know, Chad Ochocinco was probably the like best listen, because it was just like, what is he talking about? And but then this past week, Richard Jefferson had great insight on upcoming NBA playoffs. We also had a little back and forth with, he lost to Duke in the national championship in 2001, and Sam and the Wisconsin Badgers lost to Duke in the national championship in 2015. So I kind of had some fun with him on that one. I said, boy, you must hate Duke fans as much as we do. Like we go to the airport, we go to a restaurant, and Duke fans come up to Sam and heckle him. And he said, well, I think I'm too old for that. But he said, I don't think you're off the hook. I hate Wisconsin fans too, because they've prevented us from getting to the Final Four the last 2 times. So we had some fun with that. He's just a really impressive, affable guy. And it's been a new challenge for me. It's been a lot of fun for me. And I'm just so glad it kind of fell in my lap at this time when work had slowed down. And it's been a really cool opportunity.
Yeah, you kind of encapsulated what I love about it, is getting to know people you might otherwise not be able to talk to, and just opening up those doors. So definitely an awesome opportunity, and sounds like it's going to move forward. So that's great. Sounds like as well that you're in a good spot in your career. You're starting your life. You mentioned your husband, Sam Dekker, who, if you're listening to this podcast, you should know very well. Know his game, played at Wisconsin. We'll talk about him in a little bit. You also might know Olivia's father, Kevin Harlan, who's a very accomplished broadcaster. And so I want you to kind of take us through, if you could, the path to this current spot in your career. Growing up, I'm sure, around plenty of high profile sporting events, growing up around the industry. Your grandfather was the chairman of the Packers as well. So, even though you had the exposure to it, like I know people can't assume that you just walked right in. Tell me about the hard work, the steps that it took to get to this point in your career where it seems like you're thriving.
That's a great question. And thank you for saying that. That's a great question. And I get this question the most. In fact, I feel like a couple times a day, I'm responding to Instagram DMs or emails from kids trying to get in the business. And it's such a double-edged sword. And my dad and I talk a lot about this because, it's really hard and disconcerting when you get an email or a DM or a message from someone says, hey, I'm about to graduate college, next month, and I'm really wanting to get into broadcasting. What's your advice? And I'm like, great, just send me your reel. I'll take a look and blah, blah. And when they don't have a reel, I'm like, what have you been doing in college? And even before that, what were you doing in high school? And I hate to sound like doomsday police, and it's not that it's, all is lost, but I just feel like so many people, men and women, want to get in this industry. And, they love the idea of working in sports and being at games and how glamorous. Everyone thinks it's glamorous. It's not. I know it's not. They all think it's this like fascinating, glamorous thing. And then you have to kind of say, well, what are you doing to get there? And like I started doing on-air stuff in high school. I grew up in Kansas City. That's where we live now. I started going to a local news station, didn't get paid, didn't get credits. I feel like kids now want payment or credit hours or something. And I was just like hoping they'd let me ride in like the news van to some scene to do a shoot and get to watch them do it. And all you've got to do is ask, hey, after you do your stand-up, could I do a practice stand-up? Like same information, just to try it. And that's what I started doing. So after school, I'd drive to the news station and go out with their news reporter and help her, whatever she needed, and then also do a rep after she'd finished. And usually, she'd kind of watch and say, like relax your shoulders a little bit or get more comfortable or, whatever it was. And that was invaluable. And then I go to college at University of Georgia. And the reason I picked Georgia was because their athletic department basically had an opening, more or less. It was, very unofficial. Again, got nothing out of it. And they basically said, you can start hanging around and we have this whole video department and, see what you like. And I just started going like every day to football practice with our video crew. And I started asking, could I shoot a stand-up? Could I do like a practice report? And they didn't have anything like that. And they were like, sure, why not? And then I think I got better and better. And they said, we can put this up on the website, like the school's, the university's website. So that to me was huge. And then I learned how to shoot that and edit that. And then I was going to football practice by myself, shooting a daily practice report, which was incredible. Shooting, editing, putting it up on the website for truly millions of eyeballs, like across the world. People who follow University of Georgia athletics, don't ask me why someone across the world would care, but they do. And that was amazing. And any kid at a university, I always say, find your video department. Like if you're good, they're not going to turn you down. And if you're not good, you'll get good. Try it. Like ask for reps that go nowhere. Ask for reps even when the camera's not recording, and then better yet, press record on the camera, keep a little file to yourself on some hard drive and watch your reps back and see where you're not so good. See where you lose cadence, see where your voice weakens. It's pretty simple. And then, so kind of my first two pieces of advice there are the high school aspect, literally driving to a local news station and just asking if you can like jump in the car and go with them. And then 2, in high school, find your video department. And then 3, intern at a radio station, because my dad is so big on voice, like still to this day. Like I'll send him an interview I'll do with a coach at halftime and I'll say, what do you think of this? Basically asking for him to dissect my questions. Couldn't care less what my questions are. And he says, love your voice, love your pacing, love your command and authority. I'm like, great. How about the question? Because that's what everyone else is listening to. And he said, yeah, your questions are always good. But, it's that kind of background that I had growing up in my house of someone who just so created this art form, right? Like he treats this not like, oh, you're a journalist, he treats it more like, no, you're kind of a performer. And he's all about voice control. So he really suggested, again, when I was in high school and then again in college, at this tiny radio station in Door County, Wisconsin, where we spent summers. It was like a little house that they converted into a radio station. And I asked the guy, can I start doing anything on air? And he said no, which was probably normal and what most people are going to say. And he said, but you can sell ads for me. I was like, oh, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to do marketing. I want to be on air. He said, well, try selling ads. And if you sell any, you can do the voiceover of them. I thought, okay, so, I'm calling local pizza parlors and local movie theaters and whatever, trying to sell ads. And if I got any, I could write the copy, I could read it and then hear my voice on radio. And that was great experience and just something so different. So there's no excuse. And I just feel disheartened, I guess is the word I was looking for earlier, when someone comes to me and they haven't done any of the legwork and they just want to be on camera. And then I also always say, when people say that, even if they have some experience, I say, make sure you're really well-versed in the industry, top to bottom, learn how to produce, edit, shoot, write. I don't care what you do in this industry, you have to know how to write. And so I always say a lot of people start wanting to go on air, realize it's for the dogs and it's not that peachy of a job. And they realize it's actually a way better, gig to be a writer, producer, editor. So long answer to your question, but I'm so adamant about people finding opportunities and learning how to do start to finish. And hopefully you find what you're really good at in that realm.
Yeah, it's great advice. And your point about getting started early is well taken, because 3 of the guests I've had on this show, including 2 of the recent ones, yourself, Jenny Taft, and then Taylor Rooks, who's my good friend. And I know she was at your wedding as well.
Yeah.
She helped me get my foot in the door at BTN, actually.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that.
So all you guys had experience in college, I believe, all working for like the Fox Sports kind of college program. So you were covering Georgia at a high level. I feel like just that experience is invaluable.
Yeah, mine was actually owned by IMG. It was truly like the in-house video.
Gotcha.
So yeah, the only place it aired was on like our video board or scoreboard at games, which would be really cool. And at like on georgiadogs.com, our official athletic website. But it was so invaluable to me and really led to my first job because the people in Atlanta who were running Fox Sports South, who cover the Hawks, at the time, SEC football, because it was like a year or two right before SEC Network. And they saw me on the Georgia website. And that's how I got that first job. They brought me into Atlanta for an interview.
Right. So I skipped ahead a little bit, but working at Fox, I believe you covered the Hawks, right? So you got to take that coverage to the next level and get some pro experience.
That was incredible. And such a weird story. And I hate telling prospective students this story because it's like, oh boy, that sounds easy. And nothing was easy about it, but the timing could not have been more perfect. I very much feel like I was in the right place, right time. They brought me in for an interview. I was graduating a semester early. So it's December 2014 was going to be my graduation. And they brought me in September for an interview. And we're sitting down and we're talking all about the Hawks. And I had studied up. I knew this job was probably for the Hawks. I honestly didn't think it was for an on-air role. I thought it was for like, do you want to be a production assistant? Do you want to something? And I came in and really, really prepped because I knew it'd be SEC football and Atlanta Hawks. And when I'm walking out and they're saying, great, you're the best candidate we've got. We're really excited about you. We love your work. Could you do a football game as soon as like next weekend? We have one at South Carolina, like a real SEC football, like not a marquee matchup against South Carolina Central or something. It was, I forget who they played, but it was an SEC opponent on TV. And I was like, oh my God, like, yeah, like, I've got class on Friday, but what time do I have to be there? And they were like, oh, we thought you had already graduated. And never once asked for a resume, nothing. And that's another thing. I always tell kids, don't stress about your grades. If you want to go in on air, no one has ever once asked me for a resume or to see my GPA or nothing. They care about your real, Yeah. And, but that was really lucky. So I was finishing school and working in Atlanta, driving the hour and a half back and forth between Athens and Atlanta. And probably the hardest I've ever worked in a semester, truly almost was just like, I don't need to graduate, whatever, like, or I'll go back one day and do it. And my mom kept saying, you're never going to go back. Just finish, get C's. I don't care, but just finish. And truly by the skin of my teeth, I don't know how I graduated that year because I was working my tail off in Atlanta, but it was incredible and an amazing chapter. Like, could not have worked out better.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And about the grades aspect as well, because I majored in not in media, but in something else that allowed me to kind of have that extra time to work in media.
Okay.
So I was able to not, really focus as hard on the schoolwork and like get to basketball games and
What do you major in?
So I majored in sport management, which
is
decent. It had some redeeming qualities, but it definitely had a lighter workload than probably a journalism school did, and it allowed me kind of that real world experience. So when people are kind of surprised sometimes when I tell them I wasn't a student, but anyway. You mentioned covering SEC football, obviously going to an SEC school. What about your Big Ten memories? Obviously, you're very entrenched in Big Ten culture now. Husband is all about it. You're at BTN. You've covered plenty of games for ESPN. So what is a game that sticks out in your career that you've worked or covered or even attended that is memorable for one reason or another?
Can I give you three?
Please. Yeah. Three.
Okay.
The more, the better.
Okay. And I've been thinking about this because you texted me a couple of days ago that I needed to have something ready and I couldn't narrow it down. So these are my three. The first one was my second year with ESPN and I had Minnesota at Wisconsin. And I was so excited, growing up, knowing so much about this rivalry and first game in Madison. I was thrilled. Not first Wisconsin game, but first game at Madison. And Minnesota upsets. And it was huge. And I forget the score details and whatnot, but, going to chop down the goalpost and all that. It was so exciting. It was so freezing. It was that Thanksgiving weekend game, obviously. And that to me was one of the biggest, times I've enjoyed a game that I was working. Usually you're just it can be the craziest, coolest game ever, but you're so wired in and you are so working. I got to almost remove myself as a fan a little bit. And that was just beyond cool. So I had a blast with that. The second one is also Wisconsin football. Oh, and another tie to that. My uncle is PJ Fleck's agent. And so I've covered PJ at Western Michigan, known him for a while. My uncle was like in his wedding or something a couple years ago. They're really, really good friends. And so as much as I love Wisconsin and Wisconsin football, I was so excited for PJ. It was his first year at Minnesota. It was just really, really exciting. And then my second one would be my first game, still with ESPN. My first game after I was married and had changed my name was at Wisconsin, which they swear was not on purpose, but it was really special. And not only that, so Sam was with the Clippers at the time, or maybe the Cavs. I think he was with the Cavs at the time. We had just gotten married. And he got a sneak away for like that week 1 game, it's still so early. He could never, go to my mid-season games because I was during training camp or preseason. And he was able to go to this one, and they wanted to make a big deal. It was his first game back since he even, left or was in the NBA. And they said, we want to introduce you on the field, blah, blah. And he kind of mentioned, he's like, yeah, my wife's also working the game. And they were like, great, even better. And so they had us like on the Jumbotron, they're introducing him. I'm standing there like about to do my first open hit, like right after kickoff, and they're introducing him. And he's like 10 feet behind me. And it was just so surreal, so bizarre. His whole family went. And again, just really cool. The first time I went by Olivia Dekker on air, and it was at Wisconsin, and he was at the game. So that was a really cool moment for our family. And then my third is basketball. And it was just one of the coolest games I've done ever in any sport. And it was at the Palestra, Iowa, Penn State. What was that, 2 years ago? Not this past season, but the season before. And Penn State wins. It was like 90 something percent humidity in there. Like players were just slipping around. It was so hot. There's no air conditioning. It was just an absolute blast. Everything about that game felt like an AAU game, but just the competition was so high. The athleticism was so high. It was just a constant volley back and forth. And when the elements were that tough, you could just see the players were like just dying, but giving it their all. Penn State won. It was an amazing game. Those are my 3 top Big Ten games I've worked.
Sounds awesome. Yeah, I am kicking myself for not going to that Palestra game. I remember it. I think it was 2019, like you said.
So
I
cool.
think they're gonna go back at some point, so I'm excited to
I hope so.
another chance. Hopefully, we both can work that.
Yeah.
So good choices there. You mentioned Sam and a Wisconsin game. From what I was able to stitch together just by like looking at articles about you guys didn't know each other in college, right?
No.
Did you know of each other? Did you know of him? He was a big time basketball player. You were doing your thing. Where's the kind of origin story here?
Oh, that's a great question. Once we like met and started talking and dating, I was like, yeah, no, I remember you. Like, and this is what everyone says, like, still, if we go places or something, they're like, yeah, I was like, you and that Kaminsky kid, right? It's like, I think that was my recall. I was like, yeah, you and Frank Kaminsky, which he's probably like, yeah, but it was like me too. But his version of the story is that he was watching Sports Center one day with his buddy. He was second year with the Rockets, and his roommate, who's also from Wisconsin, and they're sitting around watching Sports Center on like middle of a Friday. Like it was a slow day, and it was before week 1 in college football. And I remember this so well because it's the year we met, and I was doing a high school football game. ESPN always does that like big Friday night before week 1 of college football. And so it was my first high school assignment ever. And they said they were sending me to this school in Georgia because this kid was about to commit. And so they had me do his whole commitment thing. And so that was really, really good. So for me, it was just kind of a cool assignment. But again, the commitment announcement was on Sports Center at like a really slow time of day. I just didn't think a lot of people were watching. And Sam says he happened to have the TV on ESPN at that time and said to his roommate, he said he sat up and goes, I know her. Where do I know her? And his roommate's like, you don't know her. No, you don't know her. He's like, no, where do I know her? And looks me up and he goes, yeah, she has some connection to the Packers. I know this girl. Like, why do I know this girl? And then it turns out we have a mutual friend, and he kind of reached out to her. She gave him my number. We started talking. I ghosted him for a long time because I thought, I'm not dating an athlete. Like rule number 1, like earliest thing my dad ever taught me, don't date an athlete. And so I broke all the rules, everything I'd been taught, because as we kind of kept talking, I realized he was pretty special. Just really, really humble, normal, which normal sounds like it's an insult. I think normal to a professional athlete, that's like as good a compliment as you can give. He's just so salt of the earth, so kind. And we had a really, really quick courtship. We dated 8 months before he proposed. And when I say dated, we like knew each other 8 months before he proposed. So it's really, really quick. And I always say just best year of my life, although it was the most stressful year of my life because I was still living in Atlanta, working a full Atlanta Hawks schedule with Fox Sports South, a full college football schedule with ESPN, and trying to go see my new boyfriend in Houston a lot. So I was like constantly at a game or on a plane, but it was very worth it.
So those are some elite creeping skills from Sam.
Dekker,
You know,
it's a very, very elite.
IG,
yeah.
found the mutual friend.
No.
Textbook.
Yep.
It's a great story though. So you guys didn't know each other, but you know, I'm sure there's some reminiscing of the Wisconsin basketball days, the glory days, back-to-back Final Fours for Sam. I was on with him early in COVID a year ago on Zoom, and he had some great stories. So do you guys ever rewatch his old highlights? Are there favorites in the household? What are some of the plays that, you know, he sits around talking about when he looks back in college?
Well, I will tell you, and he'll probably be embarrassed I say this, but when he's been overseas and things get really slow, I'll kind of catch him watching old college highlights, which is awesome because, and I've said this to so many other athletes I've interviewed, in retrospect, those college years mean so much more than you're ever going to know. Like it's the most fun you're ever going to have playing your sport. Everyone says that, football, basketball, everything. It's the most you're going to like your teammates, which sounds kind of sad, but it's just true. Because think of it, when you're in college, you know, no one's making money. That's about to change. No one's making money. You're all going to the dining hall together. You know, you're all riding together to the movies. You're all, you know, going, dating girls who are friends. Like you guys are going on double dates. Like everything's really insular. And you're roommates a lot of the time. Like Sam lived with half of the starting five. I just think once you get to the NBA, you think it's going to be so amazing and glamorous and the money and all this. And it's just not. It's a job. And there's a reason you're getting paid because it's really, really tough and really tough on you mentally. All of a sudden, all those like buddies that you had that also happen to be teammates, they're not there. You know, now you're just with a bunch of other professionals who are also looking out for number one, trying to provide for their families. And, you know, at any points, one of y'all are getting traded. So the fraternity of it goes away from college. But I will tell you one that we watch a lot, one that I get tagged in a lot, and so does he, is ironically a game that my dad worked of Sam's. It was, I think, the Sweet 16 against Arizona. And my dad and Reggie Miller were working a game. Again, Sam and I do not know each other. This is a couple years before we ever met. But my dad had a bunch of Wisconsin games for CBS. And always said, you know, he says this in retrospect. I don't know if this is true. I think he just says it to be nice. But he always says, boy, that Dekker kid was sure a nice kid. Like I always enjoyed talking to him, first class. And I think he just kind of made that up. But so he had this game, and before the game, you know, they were kind of giving him a hard time. Like, boy, Bo's giving you the green light. You can shoot whatever you want. Like that hasn't always been the case, huh? And Sam kind of laughed. He said, no, tonight, you just wait. Like, I'm going to be draining him. You just wait. And so he scored what was like the dagger. My dad has this famous call and he goes, dagger, done, Dekker with the dagger. And he looks over and he winks at my dad and Reggie. And that's now a GIF. And it's still like, if you type in Sam Dekker, and sometimes he'll randomly say like, hey, like just finishing this, want me to pick you up and we'll go to Chipotle, and I'll just send him the wink of him. But it's so funny. That's like become such a thing. And it's so bizarre thinking that was his future father-in-law. And no one knew the backstory of that's why he was winking, because they kind of had this thing. And Sam was like, no, you just wait. I'm going to drain him tonight. So just kind of a funny story. But I think that moment of Wisconsin basketball is a special one to us.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely hope you brought that up to Richard Jefferson in your conversation. Great.
I did not.
I was going to say, yeah, he might have been unhappy with that. And another thing to unpack there, you mentioned just like the pure nature of college basketball. Jared Sullinger, who I talked to like a month or two ago, said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, similar career in the NBA, lengthwise to Sam. And he just said, like college basketball was the last time he like truly had fun playing. So
yeah. You know what's funny though is Sam was kind of saying that this past year. He just got back late last night from Turkey. And they had a really good team, and their whole starting five was American. Two other guys were teammates of his at the Houston Rockets. He knew three others back from AAU when they were like 12, 13. So that was almost as close as he's gotten to that. And you're so far away. It's COVID, all the bells and whistles are removed, and it's just you. And, you can't go to restaurants. Even in Turkey, restaurants were closed even this past month. So they're like cooking for each other, hanging out, going to each other's apartments. And so I feel like this past year as a professional is almost as close as he got to that. And he kind of said as much when he was coming home. He's like, I'm sad to leave this group. This was a really special group.
Yeah, I know you were out there. Looked like a great time. Saw you posting some pictures, videos, and all that. So Turkey, that is not the worst place to end up if you're overseas playing hoops.
No. And we've kind of said that. And I don't know what his future holds. He's obviously hoping to get back in the NBA. He's very capable of getting back in the NBA. He had a great season. And now it's kind of all up to his agent. And he always says, you don't need 30 GMs to like you. You need one. So he's always just kind of waiting for that right fit. I know selfishly, I'd love to both live in the same country, but I think we're going to, I think we are really embracing this chapter. Last year, Russia, this year, Turkey. And we sure have had a lot of fun kind of seeing different parts of the world we never would otherwise. And I think we both feel really positive about what's coming up.
For sure. And you mentioned your dad and his now legendary call. And he's got plenty of those in his career. Iconic voice, obviously. So not sure if he's going to make this list in the next question, but I did ask you to come up with maybe 3 announcers or broadcasters or just people in the industry who you admire or look up to as someone who, like I said at the top, still relatively early in your career.
Yeah. Well, for my first, I've got to say Tracy Wolfson with CBS. She was doing the SEC package on CBS at the time with Vern Lundquist. That was I thought such an iconic dream job. And so when I was in college, she would come to Georgia, I swear all the time. She had a game at Georgia or at LSU or at Alabama. Those were always the best game of the week. And since my dad was doing CBS as well on the NFL side, he hit up Tracy and said, "Do you mind if my daughter shadows you?" So I got to shadow her. And she's so by the book, regimented, kind of buttoned up, which is the perfect person to learn from. And I'm so glad that's who I got to watch do it. And just the ins and outs, sideline reporting, there's such an art to it. There's so many random things that can't be taught in a classroom of what to look for, what to listen for, what to do the week of, who to call, random ways to get nuggets of information that really you have to be scrappy and overly curious and nosy and kind of ask for forgiveness, not permission. And I hope our bosses at BTN aren't listening to this, but you just have to be so scrappy. And I learned that from her, is just how to get your own info, original info. And it's so easy to read articles and regurgitate it. But, she really taught me of how to really be a reporter. There's such a difference with a journalist and a reporter, and being a reporter is, I keep using this word, but scrappy work. So I got to learn from her. So I have to shout her out. And then the next, Lisa Byington, who I've gotten to work with at BTN, have just looked up to for a while. And I want to keep this to all women as well, because there's so many options. I don't know if 10, 15, 20 years ago, I could have come up with 3 viable options. Of course there were women in sports, but now breaking barriers, Lisa being the first play-by-play female announcer in March Madness. How did that just happen in 2021? That's wild. Right. So I've got to go with her. And then my next one is kind of surprising, I think, just from a standpoint of less to do with her sports coverage or what she's like as a professional, more what she's like as a person, is Samantha Ponder. When I was at ESPN, I was kind of having a hard time with something, and I was in New York for something else. She lives in New York, and we met for coffee, and we'd always just messaged, texted, but never met in person. That's the thing. If I didn't come into Chicago much, and I don't unless when I'm hosting or anything, you would never know other people who work at BTN, right? So it's same thing at any other network. You don't run into each other. And so it was really special. And we just sat and she let me just pick her brain, and she gave me a ton of advice, kind of about the ins and outs even of the company and the industry and of people. And I think that really stuck with me. She absolutely did not have to do that. And the way that she saw a lot of herself in me and really like wanted to look out for me and take me under her wing, I just thought was really special, like very big sisterly. And I just really hope I have the opportunity to do that with someone else one day.
Yeah, awesome, talented list. Snubbed your dad, so hope he doesn't see that, but I think he'll be cool with it.
Yikes. Ouch. Sorry, Dad. He knows.
Uh,
I've talked ad nauseum about my dad. I have done so much with that. And that's obviously my number one. But also to me, I see him just so much unless someone brings it up or asks. Like my dad's an amazing broadcaster, won National Broadcaster of the Year 2 times in a row. He's tenfold a better dad. And I don't mean that to be cheesy, but he is like, there should be awards for best dad. He just is like the most hands-on, great memory, cares, thoughtful, like helps you with absolutely anything. And he has 3 daughters, and that has completely softened him. He's such a girl dad. And I mean, my sisters and I laugh, like if there was a high school heartbreak or something, we'd be just as willing to go to dad and talk about it and cry about it than our mom. So, we're lucky with very, very amazing parents that we're all close to, almost too close to, because now we all live in Kansas City, which was not the case a couple of years ago. And I swear I see my parents and my sisters 6 nights a week. So yeah, we're all like kind of on top of each other right now.
That's right in the fields, Olivia. And before we go, I have one non-sports question.
Okay.
And I know, you're active on social media. I saw you recently shared on Instagram.
No, I'm not active on social media. You're lying.
Come on now. You shared a mashup, that's kind of encapsulates, I think, your overall activity on social media and just your overall engagement. Kind of the style is popular now, right? Changing your clothes and vibe to imitate each social platform, whether it was Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat.
Did you think that was funny?
I did. So your comedic side was more on display, as opposed to the sideline reporter style. Even though, it's not to say you don't have any personality on there too, because you do, but this was kind of a side to, get some chuckles. And so you're on TikTok, clearly have a YouTube channel. TikTok. Right. So you're all over the place. Very versatile. Are you planning on, just continuing this and becoming more of an influencer in all these spaces? What's the outlook for your social media game, your lifestyle brand, all this?
That's a great question, and one I've not gotten. It's funny, like 3 years ago or so, Sam and I were going on a trip. It was right after his season ended. We were going to Palm Springs, and I like had just gotten this new stuff and like for the trip, like let's say a dress and a hat or whatever. And Sam's like, boy, that looks so nice. Like, boy, that looks like a big price tag. How much was that? And I was like, no, I got this on Amazon for like $12.99. And he's like, what? Like, you should tell people about this. And that's how it started. Cause I was like, I really do feel like I have a nose for a bargain. I feel like I've kind of got like a savvy for that. So I started and I said, well, I'm going to keep it all separate from my sports stuff, because I don't want to lose credibility. If I'm posting, one day an interview with so-and-so, and then I'm posting how to get a great moisturizer this day, like those don't fit in different audience. So I started a separate Instagram, Live Everywhere, and it's just clothes, home, travel. It's now become more of a travel page. And that has been so much fun for me. And I'm way more active on that one, because that's like who I am at home, or like, a makeup tutorial, as I'm sure you've watched all those. And then it's just trying to get everything together with the house has been really fun. And then that has led into a YouTube channel, which now I'm doing like longer length travel videos. And then also the TikTok, which I've always said, the second I do a dance on TikTok, like just cancel my TikTok. I'm not here to do that. But I do like sharing shorter travel videos or how-tos or something funny. So I don't know. It's in the off season. It's like, why not? I've got all this time. In football season, it's really hard to keep up with. So I don't, it's so secondary. I wouldn't call myself a legit influencer, but that being said, other companies are now coming to me for deals just on my like Live Everywhere page, which is not verified, does not have as many followers as my main page on Instagram. So I don't know. It's kind of all an experiment. It's been a lot of fun. I don't take myself too seriously, as you noticed on that. It's way more my personality, where I do like respect the following on my main Instagram page, much more male, much more there for sports coverage. And I do want to be true to that. So I'm so glad I did the separate Instagrams, and then the TikTok is just absolute nonsense. And then the YouTube is fun. YouTube's a hard medium though. It takes a lot of work to edit and shoot these videos, and I do it all myself. So it's a lot, but it's fun. And then brands, I have learned if anyone listening is interested in the space, brands are very interested in different mediums. So I just did a big deal with Nebraska Furniture Mart, this furniture depot here. And they're like, we need 3 TikToks for this, 2 Instagram posts, 10 Instagram stories, and 1 YouTube. I'm like, oh, is that all? Oh, sure. Yeah, you got it. So, but yeah, no. So it's now become like a little side hustle, to answer your question.
Just taking over the game, cornering all the markets. Olivia, I can't let you go without asking, because your grandfather, Bob Harlan, was the Packers chairman.
Yeah.
Called a Packers game with your dad for Westwood One. Got to have a Packers question in here, even though I'm a big Bears fan, and the Packers' reign of terror is coming to an end. I hate to Justin Fields taking over in the NFC North, but
no, I love that. I think Fields to the Bears is awesome. I was sad to see it, but I think it's awesome. Good fit.
Yeah. So related to that, what's going on with Aaron Rodgers? That's my question.
Well, did you see what Ron Wolf said the other day, the former Packers GM?
I did not.
He said, I can't believe this is what the NFL has become. And that's who drafted Aaron. So it has gotten nasty. Did Ted Thompson draft Aaron? I think it would be Ron Wolf. Yeah. Well, now I'm not so sure that I'm saying it out loud. It might've been Ted Thompson. No, I've asked my grandpa his thoughts on it, and he's kind of like, yeah, boy, I don't know. Cause he was there when they brought in Aaron, so lowly drafted, obviously. And he has a funny story. They were doing that like Packer tailgate thing where it's like a week and you go to different towns in Wisconsin and you do like a meet and greet, and they would always pick a couple rookies, usually not a huge name. And again, Aaron Rodgers was not. And my grandfather was he's extremely professional, and he's on the bus, like waiting for some of these rookies to jump on. And he's there really early reading his paper. And all of a sudden a car pulls up next to the bus, and Aaron and a young lady get out of the car, and she was just dropping him off. I'm sure she just picked him up that morning. and he's like, hi, Mr. Harlan, how you doing? He's like, yes. Hi, Aaron. How are you? You have a good night? Everything good? And so that was his first run with Aaron Rodgers. And, but he's always really liked him. And, Aaron and Sam used to be good friends. He used to go to all those Wisconsin games. And so I don't know. I think, he has so many interests outside of football, which is fine. That's great. But there's then nothing keeping him in Green Bay, So my thoughts are, if not this year, the next couple of years he'll leave, but it sure has gotten contentious, and it's really hard to watch the quotes go back and forth from LaFleur, Aaron. It's just, teammates of his subtweeting. It's getting so awkward. And I hate that it's come to this.
Yeah. That was the pre-Olivia Munn, pre-Danica Patrick days.
Yeah.
And Aaron Rodgers is on record. I always tell people this because I was surprised to hear it. He was on record saying that before he got offered to Cal, he wanted to go to Illinois, went to Illinois' camp.
You're lying.
Illinois' camp, and they didn't offer him a scholarship. And so he didn't go there. And as a Illinois,
you're lying.
I am.
There's no way that story's true.
I'll send you the link after this. I swear it's true. So
I've never heard that.
So he wanted to go to Illinois. It didn't happen. But Aaron Rodgers since then has gone on to become my professional father. He's my dad in every aspect, and owns my Chicago Bears, and bashes my soul. Anyway.
Well, here I will say for Packer fans, we can't act like we didn't get anything. You know what I mean? We've gotten so lucky going from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and I don't know if Jordan Love is the next successor. I highly doubt it, but I just think Packer fans can't be beating their chest saying why don't we get anything? Because we've had a pretty good run.
I'll say, yeah. That can't confirm. All right, Olivia, you've been very generous with your time. Really appreciate you jumping on. It's been awesome to kind of hear your backstory, how it's intersected with another Big Ten name and your family history and all that. So I appreciate it. Excited to work with you going forward, and enjoy the off season and building out your influencer brand.
Thanks, Alex. This has been fun.
All right. Thanks once again to Olivia for joining the show. Really cool to hear those stories about not only growing up in a sports family, but carving her own path in the industry, what it takes to break in, what it takes to have success in the industry. and then getting into some Big Ten basketball talk as well, sharing some stories and insights to her and her husband Sam Dekker's family life and some of his his memories and experiences as they intersected with hers in the sports world. So a lot of fun. Thanks again to Olivia. And coming up, we have the second part of our really packed episode here, long episode today, over 2 hours, as we have a lot of good content. And the second part is with Harold Shelton, as it usually is during now pretty much year-round. It used to be just during the season, but Harold and I have kind of expanded to a year-round format where we can talk kind of random off-season topics when the live Big Ten basketball and football are not in action. And this week we talk about the top games we've attended in person. We kept to a Big Ten scope, Big Ten audience, so these are Big Ten football and basketball games for the most part, but it does go for quite a long time because we kind of get into why those games are memorable to us, why they were significant, and hopefully they're as fun to listen to as they were to reflect on, even though there was some sentimental value for some of them for both of us. It does go on for a while, just reflecting, and as sports conversations tend to do, they unravel and stories unfold. So good conversation with Harold coming up, and we'll get to it. It's top Big Ten games we've attended with Harold Shelton. All right, back again with Harold Shelton. Very pleased to be rejoined by Big Ten Network Manager Research. Harold, your background is different today. Looks brighter. You're outside. What's up? How you feeling?
I'm good. Actually back home in Detroit, at my mom's place, kind of sitting outside on the patio here, kind of enjoying the 82 degrees that we got here in the city. So figured I might as well change it up a bit.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. We got the warmth as well, but it's a little soggy here. It's been raining, so hopefully that clears up. Looks nice where you're at. And we just talked about before, no weather issues anticipated, so that's good.
No, not at all. It's supposed to be like this the rest of the week, maybe get up to 90 by the weekend. So hopefully that weather will be like that in Chicago when I get back.
Right. And, when it's that time of year, it means no Big Ten sports are really going on. They're wrapping up some of the spring sports right now. Springtime, obviously, and, we're searching for conversation topics. We got a fun one this week. We're going to go through and list some of the best Big Ten sporting events and general sporting events we've attended in person, kind of compare our lists here. But first, real quick, like we've been doing recently, our guest memories and memories you have of the primary guests on the show here. So this week it's Olivia Dekker, and obviously she's married to Sam Dekker, who we are familiar with. So Olivia is our coworker during basketball season, and then I'm sure you have some memories of Sam as well. So any thoughts on the Dekker power couple here?
So I've only met her once. She came in, I want to say this was 2019. She was doing studio stuff for the first time, and she couldn't have been nicer. I remember how nervous she was kind of going into it because she's normally just, doing a really good job as a sideline reporter, or she might do an interview like pregame, postgame, stuff like that. But, it's a little different when you're like hosting a halftime or a postgame show. And so she was just trying to get the rhythm and the cadence down. But you could tell that, she picked it up pretty well, pretty quickly. And, I think she's done a really good job for us. And, I see nothing but success for her going forward.
Yeah, I remember at the Big Ten tournament this year, we had her kind of take us inside the bubble with a GoPro. And she was asking some questions and at first seemed like, oh, I don't know if this will be any good. And she gave it back to us. And she's like, this wasn't exactly the best. And like, please, hopefully you can do something with it. And then we got it and it was like flawless. And it was, a perfect vlog style thing that you see on YouTube all the time. And so she just downplayed it. And it ended up great. So, yeah, fun conversation with her. And then any Sam Dekker memories that jump out to you from his electric days at Wisconsin?
So Sam Dekker was just a guy who hit a lot of big shots. I remember that 2015 run that they had. He hits the big one against Arizona to put that game away to get them back in the Final Four. And then the Kentucky game, it's tied late, a couple minutes left, he steps up, hits a big three there to kind of help Wisconsin pull off that upset, knocking off undefeated Kentucky. So I definitely just remember him being a big shot maker, and he was kind of like you didn't really see players like him under Bo Ryan for a while. Like, a lot of them were, they had a particular style. You didn't really see an athletic wing under Bo Ryan. Like you saw like athletic point guards or, good fundamental bigs like the Delures and Wilkinsons and Frank turned into that, but you didn't really see one on the wing like that. And I think he was a big, big reason why Wisconsin, had some of their best teams ever with him on the court.
Yeah, it was fun on a Zoom with them early in the COVID days last year. Him and Frank and Russ, Gosser, and those guys, Showalter, they were all reflecting. It was fun to kind of see inside that, that camaraderie they had, and you saw the chemistry worked really well with them. So definitely fun team, fun to reflect with the Dekkers for sure. Let's move it along though now to the topic we talked about at the top. Best games that we attended in person. We kind of decided to break it up by top 5 Big Ten football games, top 5 Big Ten basketball games, and then just a random assortment, top 5 miscellaneous games, such as the life of trying to come up with off-season content. But I think this is going to be a fun one, and we should probably put the disclaimer in there that I feel like this is always said when you talk to someone who works in sports. They're like, oh, I don't even get to watch the games and all that. And while that's sort of true, I think it's more impacting this conversation because a lot of times we're working, trying to watch all of the games instead of just one, and being in the underbelly of the stadium. So we're usually like in some sort of studio watching all the games. So if our lists are not that impressive, that would be why, because we're trying to have our eyes on 7 at once.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I was kind of racking my brain, especially on the miscellaneous one. That was going to be really hard, but I was fortunate enough to be able to get to quite a few memorable games. I kind of started at Big Ten at the right time, right when my guys were getting it going. So that part wasn't as hard for me, but I'm curious to see what your list is like.
Yeah, I think your Big Ten football one's going to be a lot better than mine, just because some of mine are based on growing up watching Illinois football, which had a couple of great seasons, but not a whole lot in between. So struggled to come up with too many memorable games there. But let's start with you and get your number 5 top 5 football game.
So if I was a fan of this team, or if I was older, I probably would have put it higher and appreciated it more. But number 5 for me, involving a Big Ten team, is actually Colorado, Michigan, 1994. That was my first ever college football game. Shout out to my dad for getting tickets for that. For those who are unaware, that is the Cordell Stewart game at the Big House. I didn't remember a whole lot. I remember Michigan was winning most of the game, and I remember the stadium going completely silent when Westbrook comes down with the touchdown. And I remember, kind of asking my dad, kind of what happened. I'm 9-10 years old. I didn't fully grasp everything that was going on. And I vividly remember there was a fan, because we were way up in the bleachers, and there was a fan next to us. And he is really upset. He's got the megaphone and he's just hammering away at this bleacher, for a good 15, 20 seconds. And I'm asking my dad, hey, what's wrong with him? I'm 9 or 10 again. I'm not processing the magnitude of what happened. He's like, oh, he's just really upset that Michigan lost. And I was like, oh, okay. And we walked away, and when I look back at it now, I'm that was one of the most memorable college football moments of all time. And that was a nice way for me to enter the sport, so to speak.
If that's number 5, I'm a little worried about what the rest is going to be. Half the top, because I even knew when you said those teams, that was the year I was born, but I still know about that game, right? That's crazy. So if that's number 5, like I said, I'm a little concerned.
More personal stuff for me.
Yeah, how it's going to stack up to my list. But my number 5 is not, a game that's going to be probably remembered by too many people, but it's because it's also kind of sentimental. Like you said, one of the earliest games I remember. And it was a Illinois-Purdue game, 2001. And I picked it not only because it's one of the earlier games that I remember going to, but also just because you don't usually see Illinois and Purdue both ranked in the top 25. Illinois was number 21. Purdue was number 20. And I didn't get a chance to go back and look at kind of the play-by-play. But if I remember correctly, it was a pretty close game for most of it. Illinois ended up winning 38-13, but I think it was a late push that they had because they had a pick six and some really late, just turnovers that helped make the score look more lopsided. But we went to West Lafayette for that game. I remember it being, a really live atmosphere. And I remember when Illinois pulled away, Purdue fans were congratulating me and my family and saying good luck the rest of the year. And that was just a fun one to be at, especially being so young. And I think Illinois ended up going to the Sugar Bowl that year, which is a height they only got to one other time in my lifetime when they went to the Rose Bowl in 07. So that's number 5 for me. Not like an all-time memorable game, but kind of a unique matchup that we don't normally see, especially with those programs.
Yeah, I want to say I remember that 2001 Purdue team. I believe that was the team that had like Kyle Orton, and I think they started 5-0 and got to like 5th in the country. They had like a huge game with Wisconsin, like for game day, and Wisconsin wound up coming back to win, and Purdue's season just kind of derailed for them. And I feel like at the same time, Illinois started to take off. That was a loaded team with Brandon Lloyd and Kurt Kittner and those guys. That was a really, really fun team.
Yeah, I think it's maybe Christian Morton who got the pick six or fumble or scoop and score to seal it. But yeah, those great teams. Walter Young was another good receiver who played in the NFL. So yeah, definitely good memories there. All right, what do you got at number 4?
Number 4, I've got the 2015 Big Ten Championship game. Michigan State, Iowa. It was weird. That was the one championship game in the non-COVID era since I've been there where I didn't go as an employee. For whatever reason, just that year, we didn't send as many people. And so I said, well, I'm going to go as a fan. We got a chance to get to the playoffs, so I want to be there to see it, either way. Most stressful game I've ever been at and watched. The 22-play drive, like you didn't realize it was that long as it was happening, but it was one of those where they got the ball back and, seemed like every third down was like, if they don't convert here, they're going to lose kind of thing. And they just kept moving it. And you're like, okay, this is going to be the final drive of the game. Like if they don't score, like they're not going to go to the playoff. And that was the whole thing the whole time. And so when they finally scored and then got to stop at the end, it was just like a huge sigh of relief. It wasn't even like I was excited. It was just a very draining experience as a fan because it was, your typical like Big Ten smash mouth, 3 yards, cloud of dust, 16-13. It was Michigan State, Iowa, and those are the kind of games that happen when both of those teams are good.
Yeah, such a great and classic game. I was in college watching that. I think it was my would have been my senior year, just December 2015. So yeah, I remember watching that at my apartment or my friend's apartment, and we at the time I was a casual Big Ten fan, obviously going to University of Illinois, like still paid attention, especially the Big Ten championship game, but didn't really have a strong rooting interest, and it was just a captivating game. So definitely remember that. And if anyone listening is wondering why we're talking about Michigan State and Illinois so much, those are our alma maters. So anyone unfamiliar, that's why these will tilt heavily toward those schools. My number 4 is another Illinois win. 2007, mentioned that as one of their BCS years in my lifetime when they beat Brett Bielema's Wisconsin team. Illinois, I think, was unranked at the time. Wisconsin came in at number 5. This is when Juice Williams' team was still on the way up in that Rose Bowl year. 2007, as everyone who follows college football closely knows, was a pretty much unprecedented and really wild year, starting with that Appalachian State Michigan game on Big Ten Network, the first broadcast on BTN. So just a crazy year of upsets, and you had like Kansas being great that year, Mizzou, a lot of I think was it UCF and UConn and all kinds of teams.
USF was like number 2.
USF, yeah.
West Virginia was a game away from playing for the title, and it was one of the wildest years that I can ever recall in college football, for sure.
Yeah, just insane. So this is another one of those games in that year that was crazy, and it was a late. It came down to a late finish, if I remember correctly. Still was only 13 years old at the time, but just a lot of fun. I remember that's when you kind of realized that the team was legit. I think they'd beaten Penn State, a ranked Penn State team the week before or the week after that. I should have looked it up, but those were, I just remember back-to-back games, and it was like, okay, this season could turn into something kind of special and unique. So that was a good one. And now, serendipitous that Brett Bielema is now the head coach at Illinois. So just an interesting little wrinkle there.
Yeah, no doubt. I remember that was kind of the game for me where I really discovered Rashard Mendenhall. Like, I knew about Juice, and I remember the year before I was actually at Michigan State Illinois game where Illinois broke like a long losing streak and like got their first Big Ten win and however long it was. And so I remember like they were really young at that point, but Zook was bringing guys in, like the talent level was certainly increasing. They got Aurelius Ben as a freshman in that 07 team. And so everything started to build. And 07, obviously, with Wisconsin, Penn State, Ohio State, knocking all those guys off to go to the Rose Bowl, it all came together.
Yeah, I remember that 2006 game as well. And that being, like you said, kind of the first arrival, even though the team wasn't very good. And something about the midfield at Michigan State that just caused controversy. I remember Illinois tried to plant their flag. There was a whole press conference issue. And then, we know what Devin Bush did 10 years later, 12 years later. So fun times.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It wasn't fun in the moment, but I definitely remember that at the end. It was the John L. Smith era was very interesting.
All right. What do you got at number 3?
Number 3 is going to take me back to a time where I was a student. It's the 2001 Michigan State game. For those who are unfamiliar, I believe Michigan was top 5 in the country at that point. Michigan State was unranked. But, they had weapons on offense for sure with Chuck Rogers, T.J. Duckett, and Jeff Smoker. And, Duckett had a crazy game. Chuck was Chuck. But still, Michigan had a lead late. That's the controversial Spartan Bob game, for those who don't know, where they say that, an extra second was added on the clock. I'm in the student section, and we're all wondering if we're going to, Smoker's going to spike the ball in time. We look up, they got a second left. We're okay. So, I can remember the entire final play going in slow motion, and Smoker's rolling out to his right, and he throws it all the way across. And I forget who the defender is, but he jumps up and doesn't get it. And TJ Duck is literally just standing there by himself, and he just catches it in his chest, and game over. And I remember it was complete pandemonium in the student section. People were jumping on me, I'm jumping on other people. We wound up 5 or 6 rows lower than where we started. It was just, a complete mess. And it was a fun way as a student to have, that was my first Michigan State rivalry game as a student. And it was the last one they won in 7 years. So it was good to get that one at least.
Yeah, love the student memories. Another reason that, not that going to Illinois at the time I did would have resulted in many memorable games, but I didn't get to go to any games as a student, maybe a few, but I was working in the athletic department at the time. So we had to work football Saturdays. I guess I picked, a good time to go because I wasn't really missing out on much and could kind of make some extra money, I guess. But yeah, it's the old cliche of working in sports, like I talked about at the top, where the people who work in sports always kind of whine that either they don't get to see or go to a lot of games or enjoy them. The people that say they go and don't enjoy them are the ones that bother me, because I'm like, come on, you cannot tell me that. I'm not that jaded yet where I go and I'm like, oh, this is work. I still, and hopefully I'll never be that person, but I still go and really, really enjoy it. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a student memory on my list here, but my number 3 was right before I was a college student, because growing up down in Champaign-Urbana, we did go to all the games growing up. And number 3 is 2011, when Illinois was on their path to starting 6-0, and eventually I think they got up to number 15 or something in the country, and it looked like Ron Zook was going to have a second wave there, and didn't end up panning out. But this is on the way up of that trajectory for the second time, when Arizona State came to Illinois, and they had Brock Osweiler, the rocket ship, and Vontaze Burfict. So, a couple of infamous names there in NFL lore. But great Arizona State team, or at least on paper it was, and they had a lot of hype coming in at the time. And it's been on our BTN Classic rewind games a few times, and I rewatched it. It wasn't that great, but upon second watch, but being there, I think the energy, It was a Saturday night game. A lot of Arizona State fans were there tailgating, and it was pretty rowdy. And even being in high school, you kind of, sensed the excitement. So just good memories there. And Illinois won late, and it was a pretty exciting ending, at least, even though the game itself wasn't that great. They won 17-14. So that's one that I just remember, like, growing up, that's kind of what the Illinois football experience could be. I think that's what you'd show off to recruits of what you're trying to get back to as far as the atmosphere goes. But that was just a lot of fun. So I'm sure, you maybe have some memories of that season and the eventual demise of Ron Zook there.
Hey, I definitely remember them starting 6-0 and then going 6-6, but they still won the bowl game at the end of the year. But you're absolutely right when it comes to like the energy. Like that's a lot of the stuff that you remember. I definitely remember times for games that weren't that great, so I didn't put them on the list. But I remember like a moment here or there, whether it's a goal line stand and like the whole crowd around you is going crazy, or like a ridiculous touchdown catch and everybody's going crazy, even though the game itself wasn't great. But you remember those few moments that kind of bring everything back, and you can remember the echo and remember just how loud the place gets. And that's the best thing about sports.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also later that season, it was part of their 6-6 slide. They lost a game against Ohio State where both teams were pretty highly ranked. Ohio State always is, but Braxton Miller, I think they didn't throw the ball or something. Like Braxton Miller ran for a couple 100 yards or something. Or I just remember there being some weird stat about no passes attempted. And then Russell Wilson beat them on a late play. And there were a few games where they would have held on. They would have been like 8-4, 9-3. Maybe it would have salvaged the season, but it didn't work out that way, obviously. So interesting season nonetheless there. Number 2, now my games get a little better as we get going, less Illinois focused. How about you? Are you sticking on the MSU wagon?
Kind of hard not to. I was at both of these. The 14 Rose Bowl, the 100th edition of the Rose Bowl.
Wow. Yeah, so you have a good reason. You got big time games in the last decade plus to talk.
Yeah, that's the thing. I joined the network at the absolute best time for football. It was kind of the start of the 3-year run where they finished in the top 6 every year. And the first Big Ten, like the first Rose Bowl trip in quarter century. So just growing up, just hearing about the Rose Bowl, how great the Rose Bowl is, being at the house January 1st, as a Midwest kid, you're always watching the Rose Bowl. And I said I would never go until Michigan State went. I said I wasn't going to do it. And so I remember 2011, great Wisconsin-Michigan State game I wasn't at, but great game, heartbreaking finish. You're kind of like, man, I don't know, like program like Michigan State, are we really going to have another chance like that to get back there? And 2013 happens. And they get to the Rose Bowl, they wind up winning it, and I remember everything about it, from the sun setting over the mountains, the lights come on, it's the fourth quarter, it starts to get real, and it felt like a Big Ten game because it was Stanford and both teams wanted to just be physical. They had the rough start to the game, down 10-0, 17-7. As they did most of the year, the defense just kind of locked it down from there. Connor Cook made plays. And I just remember, like, everything was green. Like, everybody from the state just went out there for a week. And everywhere you went, it was Michigan State shirts and Michigan State hats and license plates and everything. Because I think no one wanted to miss it this time. So everybody was there. And I remember just the loud roar on the fourth down stop. It actually wasn't in the building on that because we were going outside to tape our post-game show. And so we're watching it on a delay on the TV on the set. And I just remember hearing the roar, and I'm like, I know we have more fans there, so I think this is a good thing, but I'm not really sure. And I see the play, and like we all go crazy on the set. It's like, hey, Big Ten finally got one. So I definitely, that was a memory-making experience for sure.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. I have not been to the Rose Bowl. I plan on going, sometime, hopefully soon. Didn't go when Illinois made it. 08 would have been the January 1st date of that one. But yeah, hope to get out there. It kind of sounds like you experienced the, like you said, traditional Midwest growing up, seeing it on TV kind of path, and then it all kind of materializes in front of you. So love to experience that myself someday. Definitely a bucket list type thing. And working at Big Ten Network, we're fortunate, I think, to have that opportunity. Not only if your favorite team doesn't have a chance to go, but if you have a representative there every year, which we will. So looking forward to that, hopefully down the road. My number two is another, every year type of deal. And I did not get to go to the 2016 Big Ten championship, or else that probably would have been my placeholder here, which was the Wisconsin Penn State one. But 2017 one was pretty good too. That's the one I have here. Ohio State ended up winning 27-21. And I remember Wisconsin making it pretty interesting. I remember Andrew Van Ginkel had a scoop and score like right in front of me on the sideline. And we were probably on the 10-yard line. That made it interesting. And Wisconsin, I know, threatened at the end. They needed a stop that I believe they ultimately couldn't get. I think Ohio State kicked a late field goal in that one. A lot of these games run together, to be honest, when I'm trying to piece the memories together, because it's Ohio State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Northwestern. So I've been to 3 of the last 5. And this one I think was probably the best of the Big Ten championships I went to. And I figured I should probably get one of those in there because it's one of the more important football games I've been to in college sports. So I don't know if you have any memories of that one.
Yeah, I remember that one. I want to say that was also the game where they had a delay because it was a turf issue.
Yeah, I think that was Turf Monster game. Yeah.
So
that was also, I should have mentioned that. That was awesome.
That was awesome because I remember the fan support that the turf guy was getting as he put the field back together there. The Big Ten championship game, I know it hasn't been around that long. We're coming up on 10 years on it now. I guess 11 now. But it's been a lot of really, really good games. A lot of great finishes. Underdogs hanging around a lot longer than you would think. Some of them even winning outright. And it's been fun getting able to go, and just kind of take it all in. Like you said, even though you're going for work, you still kind of remind yourself like, hey, this is a great moment. You shouldn't lose sight of that moment, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun, like I said, attending and seeing the turf thing happen in person. I should have mentioned that off the top. I kind of forgot which year that was, but a lot of pressure on that guy to get that done. It's one of those things, right? Like if you're trying to get the basketball loose when it's stuck somewhere, or mop the floor when somebody just slipped, or something where like a lot of rides on you. I think this is probably the most pressure filled situation I've seen, because this guy literally has to do something that he probably can take his time on normally, and probably in a situation didn't expect to be thrown into. And yeah, the comedic value to it, and it was just pretty overall hilarious. So definitely that's a good point. And like to your point about conference championship games, I feel like that's always a topic that's brought up when people who are arguing against expanding the college football playoff are like, well, the conference championships won't mean anything, which, first of all, we don't know because the format could include conference champions. But you're telling me that a major game, probably in a neutral city where 2 great teams are playing, that people aren't going to get fired up about that and watch? They're going to watch, like, even if it doesn't have like a play-in round of stakes baked into it. Like it's just a fun, kind of unique experience that people look forward to every year. So I don't buy it that those will be rendered meaningless if the football playoff expands.
No, I agree. And to the point I was making earlier, like we've seen upsets happen in that game. We've seen teams needing to win to get into the playoff. That happened in 2014. Ohio State was on the outside looking in before they put, 59 on Wisconsin to get in. We've seen, Michigan State, Iowa in a winner-take-all situation for the championship and the playoff. So, yeah, to say that it would be meaningless, I don't agree at all.
All right, number 1, what is your best Big Ten football game you've been to?
It's actually the first that I've been to as an employee at Big Ten Network, which was the 2013 Big Ten championship game. It was Michigan State, Ohio State. And, that was, both teams were undefeated in conference. Michigan State had 1 loss overall. Ohio State was undefeated, number 2 in the country. If they win, they go to the playoff. And, I think Michigan State could have gone to the Rose Bowl even with a loss. because of how things shook out. But it was one of those where, you got a chance to cement it. You want to see the players with the roses. Like I remember, seeing Wisconsin do that 2 years prior, and it was a sickening feeling as a Michigan State fan at the time. And when they start out 17-0, you're like, whoa, like they're up 17-0 Ohio State, like let's go. And then Ohio State comes all the way back, scores 24 straight, and you're like, man, like hopefully they can win, but even if they don't, like you got to at least keep it close so the Rose Bowl's still at play. And then they kind of right the ship, and Langford splits the safeties at the end to salt it away. I'm on the Michigan State sideline, kind of getting ready for the post game show, and as our producer would say, like school was out when they got the fourth down stop, and you just saw like all the hugs, all the tears, the fans behind, and all the Michigan State fans that were behind us. Like it was like pure nirvana, pretty much. And I remember just that feeling of being able to call family, like, hey, we finally got it done, all that kind of stuff. Like it was an awesome feeling. Definitely got spoiled considering that was my first one. Kind of hard to top that. But yeah, I'll remember that game forever. I'd be very, very hard pressed to find something to knock it out of that spot.
Yeah, sounds like an experience that a lot of us, Big Ten fans who don't root for Ohio State or some of the powerhouses like Michigan State was in the 2010s. Something that we all kind of dream of doing. My number one is not nearly or there's no emotional attachment to it really, and it's a Big Ten loss, so it's not even one that anyone listening will really look fondly on outside of the fact that it was a great game and it was probably the best college football game I've been to. Definitely the most high profile game I've been to. It's 2019 Fiesta Bowl. Technically, it might be called the 2020 Fiesta Bowl, but it happened late 2019 in the 2019 season. Clemson beats Ohio State 29-23. That, of course, was the game that Ohio State avenged last year when they kicked the snot out of Clemson in New Orleans. But the first time around, well, not the first time, but the 2019 edition was just an awesome game. It was electric. The Buckeyes jumped out to a lead that looked like it would be insurmountable. Not that it was that many points, but they just looked kind of unstoppable and had looked, pretty invincible most of the year. So there were some moments that we've talked about on the show and Ohio State fans will talk about. And, people remember whether it was the, I believe Sean Wade overturned call, J.K. Dobbins getting tripped up, on the way to, I think would have been a 3-score lead, 3-touchdown lead. And just moments that right when it looked like Ohio State was going to run away with it, Clemson was able to claw back. It was a thrilling finish. I remember we went down from our seats up top down on the field, and Fields threw an interception, I believe, to seal it for Clemson. But it was just a thrilling game. First postseason bowl game I've ever been to. So it was a great just memory to kind of be there and see the pomp and circumstance surrounding a game of that magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that's the best Big Ten team I've seen since I've been at the network. They had everything on both sides of the ball. In addition to the Sean Wade overturn, there was the fumble return for a touchdown that also got overturned.
Right. Yeah, I conflate the two.
Like both of those things. I mean, again, Ohio State probably could have put the game away long before that, like you mentioned. Dobbins getting tripped up, and I think he dropped the touchdown in that same drive, and he had to settle for 3 and stuff like that. But even with that, like that game should have been Ohio State's, and I wanted to see like Joe Burrow against his former team. Like Ohio State had studs all in the secondary to go up against those LSU receivers. I really feel like Ohio State was the best team in the country that year. It's unfortunate we'll never be able to see that matchup. But I wish I could have been there. That was a great game to see.
Yeah, Ohio State LSU would have been sick, and it would have been it was in New Orleans, so that would have been just an insane type of experience. And like you said, we'll never know, but it was still a great game nonetheless. H has shifted over to hoops now. Impressive list, I got to say. If there was a competition going on here, you would have won. I think we knew going in that would be the case, but it's okay. I think I have some decent ones for hoops, but I'm sure you'll have some Michigan State ones that'll rival it because they've also been extremely successful on the hardwood. So let's get into it. I'll start off this time, number 5. I'm going back to 2005. This is the farthest back I'm going to go. And it is when Illinois beat Wake Forest, blew out Wake Forest. It's the only non-close game in my list, but I had to include it just because of the talent that was on the floor that night. Obviously, Illinois had a great team, number one most of the year with Darren Williams, D. Brown, Luther Head, and those guys. And then Wake Forest had Chris Paul that year. So a guy, who's still playing at an extremely high level. It's hard to believe because I can, barely remember what happened in the game. And Chris Paul's just been elite for so long that got to appreciate the greatness there. But that was a game that was highly anticipated. Illinois fans kind of knew they had their best team in a long time, and maybe they were surmising that the team was potentially number one caliber team, but it didn't really become official until they beat Chris Paul and Wake Forest, and really it wasn't even a close game. I think they're up 30 a lot of the game. Wake Forest closed it to within 20, just like in garbage time, but just a cool experience. It felt like you were the Duke or the North Carolina or the center of the college basketball universe because people were camping out for the game. It was one of those orange out crowds, and like I said, just kind of the arrival of Illinois basketball from what had been a really good program in that time to an elite program that was a national title contender.
Yeah, I remember watching that game and thinking like, oh, okay, like these dudes are for real. Like this, like they look like the best team in the country. And I knew Michigan State was, a really good team that year, and I knew Wisconsin would be good. And you're always thinking about Big Ten championship and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I don't know if we can beat these dudes. Like they look legit. And I remember I was a student, and they came to Breslin, top 10 matchup, the whole thing. Illinois number one at the time. And I mean, Michigan State played really well. Like they shot the ball really, really well and lost by 12. And I was like, you know what? They're just that good. Like D. Brown and Darren Williams and Luther Hill, like they couldn't miss. Like they were just a machine offensively. And like, I'm talking to my buddies there, and I'm just like, dude, like we're not playing bad. Like they're just that good. Like, and you saw like they got all the way to the title game. Bad calls against James Augustine kind of took them out of their game plan, but that basketball team, they were unbelievable.
Yeah, I remember that Michigan State game as well for sure. And just kind of the satisfaction of some of those games when they were highly anticipated, and Illinois, would go in and either not struggle or just overwhelm at the end. Teams like you mentioned that Michigan State game. I remember Wisconsin was highly ranked with Alonzo Tucker that year, and they just didn't have enough.
Game.
What's that?
Jack Ingram game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good memory. Jack Ingram was one of my favorite players for sure. Sixth man of the year. But that's my number 5. Don't have any other 05 Illinois memories on there because I didn't go to like the Arizona comeback. I did go to both Final Four games, but like the semifinal wasn't that exciting, and then the final is not one that I like to relive. So I'm tossing it over to you for number 5, H.
So I'm kind of to cheat the list a little bit. I'm going to go to 2018 Big Ten tournament, just as a whole in New York. There's a lot of questions about whether it was going to work, moving it out to New York, playing it a week early, kind of getting away from your base. It was the second straight year. The DC one wasn't as well received. It wasn't as packed. But the New York one was outstanding. I mean, you had a ton of great games, a ton of good storylines. Rutgers getting to the quarters as a 14 seed and having that place jumping. I remember, Tony Carr going crazy against Ohio State, and they upset them. And, I remember the Michigan State Saturday, like all the energy in that building, all the juice in that building, especially early when it looked like Nick Ward and Charles Matthews were going to get into it. And it felt like a heavyweight fight. And even though Michigan won the game, like I still just remember the energy of that game and that tournament. And I'm thinking like, man, they did a really good job. It just really, really worked. That's probably the best like overall tournament experience I've had.
Yeah, glad you mentioned that because I didn't have any games from that tournament on my list, but like you kind of alluded to, if we were ranking events, I would definitely have it on there. And it's totally a fair game, I think, because like I couldn't pick one particular game because there were a few like really good, almost evenly matched games, and the experience overall was so much fun. Like if I had to pick any experience at BTN that I've gone to, I'd probably pick that week. It was awesome. And can definitely second what you said about the energy in Madison Square Garden. It was cool to have, like you said, MSU, Michigan, huge alumni bases in New York City, kind of squaring off there. I remember like the near fights. It was awesome. So yeah, glad you brought that tournament up because it was great. And I thought about if the game would have been a little closer. There was another one there, Michigan Rutgers, which obviously two more large alumni bases squaring off in MSG. That was just like another heavyweight fight. It was a Saturday afternoon. Game didn't end up being that close, but it was just a really cool experience. So glad you had that one in there. I had another Big Ten tournament game between Michigan State and Michigan for my number 4. It's the 2019 Big Ten tournament final. That was at United Center in Chicago. It was the last Big Ten tournament game before COVID. The last one that was beyond the Wednesday night. So that one was electric, as I'm sure you remember. I think coming up to you right before the end of the game as Michigan State was trying to close it out. So just another fun memory. And I have been to some really good Big Ten tournament games, but that one definitely is close to the top of the list.
Yeah, that's actually my number 4 as well.
There we go.
So I got some synergy there. I know for me, it was kind of a similar theme in all 3 games that they played that year. They were pretty evenly matched. So the fact that Michigan State was able to win all 3 was pretty crazy. But, it was usually Michigan getting out to, a pretty sizable lead. Cash was kind of going crazy in the second half. I remember just like the Kyle Arns injury and like how everybody like went dead silent as that happened. And I think that kind of galvanized Matt McQuaid because he had the game of his life. And I remember Cash just getting that layup over Teskey late. And I'm like, I don't know how he made that. It was literally coming like right at me because I'm sitting underneath the basket. And I'm thinking, if they can get a stop here, like they go 3-0 against Michigan and like sweep the Big Ten and the Big Ten tournament title, like that would be a pretty awesome, nice feather in the cap. So I think that's probably the best title game I've been to in person because I didn't get to see the Wisconsin-Michigan State 2015 in person. So that would probably be the best one I've seen up close.
Yeah, I remember after that game, I was on the court and tweeted a picture of Steven Izzo, who I think he was pretty emotional. And I didn't know what he looked like or who he was. He wasn't on the team yet. I tweeted it and people were like, how could you not know that's Steven Izzo? That's Izzo's son. And I'm like, sorry, I just didn't know. Like that's
not on the team yet.
Right. Exactly. So, you mentioned a great Big Ten tournament final game. The 15 one was great. I wasn't there. I went to some of those games. I went to the semifinal. I believe it was Michigan State, Ohio State back in 15 at United Center. But one that was another, final that I think people will look back on as being really, really exciting. And especially because a lot of people more than usual saw it because they tuned in for Selection Sunday a couple months ago and the game was still going on. That's my number 3. It's Illinois and Ohio State over in Indy at Lucas Oil Stadium. A lot of elements that went into this one. Illinois getting back to prominence, right? Like they had a great year, but this is kind of the first tangible thing they had won where they could cut the nets down and celebrate. With the fans who were back in the building for the first time that weekend in the pandemic era. And, just hearing fans react to everything that happened that weekend was just kind of refreshing. It was the first time that you really had experienced that in over a year. So just the culmination of a lot of things. It was a great game. Like Ohio State had an incredible comeback to make that a game again after going down big early on. Dwayne Washington was an absolute dog out there. I mean, he was a terrifying player. Somebody who, could fill it up from any distance really. And it was one of those guys where it's just like, do whatever you can to kind of keep the ball away from him if you're Illinois, because the dude is going to pull up and probably make you pay. So a lot of great players on the floor. I thought, maybe Ayo Dosunmu was going to have one of his moments. And to be honest, he never really looked the same after missing those late shots against Ohio State to try and win that game. He missed a few in a row and then kind of never had that swagger again in an Illinois uniform. So that was unfortunate for his, just kind of aura that was shattered a little bit in that game, but teammates picked him up. Some just overall great basketball that was played and two great teams that I think probably really respected each other toward the end of the year because they played 3 times and had 3 mostly close games and played pretty evenly matched throughout. So just an overall really fun experience there.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to watch from TV. So I can only imagine what it was like there. Even though the fan experience was limited, they actually had fans. So going over a year without it and then getting it, I'm sure 500 felt like 5,000, 15,000 even. So that was a lot of fun to watch. It's terrible as a researcher trying to do a game like that because you're like getting all your Illinois stuff ready. Then Ohio State comes back, and then you're like, okay, I gotta get Ohio State stuff ready just in case. And then you're like, okay, well now it's going to overtime. So now I got to worry about the tournament selection stuff. And it's like everything's going on at once. And so even though the game is awesome, you're still kind of like, I still need to look up stuff over here, or I need to see what's going on. And you're kind of just listening for stuff in the background instead of like intently watching it. But yeah, that game was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think they let in 8,000 for those games, and it had to be 95% Illinois fans, and it was selfishly fun because like family was there, friends were there, people from college, people from hometown, like you run into people after the game, so that was a good time. And also selfishly, like because there was not that much media allowed in, we had this kind of set behind one of the baskets to ourselves, and it was a multi 100 square foot set, and it had been kind of cleared out because CBS was calling the game and our set wasn't there anymore. So me and one other person basically had this whole area to ourselves, unimpeded, could see right. Like you can't get a better seat in a football stadium than that. So just something that'll probably never happen again. I'm glad it won't happen again with I want people shoulder to shoulder in there, but it was making the best of that situation. So that was fun.
Yeah.
All right. What do you got number 3?
So I'm actually going to go back to pre-student for me. It's the 2000 Midwest Regional. It was in Auburn Hills in Michigan. This is Michigan State trying to get back to the Final Four after losing the year before the Duke. And they're playing Syracuse, they're playing Iowa State. And I mean, I believe to this day they don't win the national title if that region is played anywhere else. I fully believe the fans were the biggest reason that they were able to overcome, just because again the energy in the building. That's probably 90% Michigan State fans, I would think, and they're down big to Syracuse. I mean, 14, I think, at one point in the second half, and it got to a point where the crowd just kind of overwhelmed Syracuse in a way. Like once Michigan State got going, like they showed the title medal and like wound up winning by 17. And then 2 days later, playing Iowa State, Marcus Fizer, Jamal Tinsley, and those are probably the 2 best teams in the country that year. Once Kenyon Martin got hurt, and so they're going back and forth. Iowa State has a lead, and again, like the crowd kind of gets Michigan State back in it. They go on a crazy run to end it. The alley for Mateen Cleaves to Morris Peterson out of the timeout puts him up 3 late, and I mean the place goes absolutely berserk. Like one of the loudest like moments I could ever remember, and it was kind of like at that moment where I was like, yeah, I need to like sign up for this and like be a student here for sure. Like I pretty much knew I was gonna go there, but then like going to that with my dad and like celebrating and watching them cut down the nets and say we're going to win a national championship and all that stuff, and which they wound up doing a week later. Like that was awesome stuff for me.
Yeah, you kind of put me in the moment there. Sounds like a like you talked about with football, kind of every college sports fan's dream, and one of those moments that shapes, like you said, it shaped where you were eventually going to go to school, even if that was already maybe in the cards. It just cemented that. So that's a cool experience for sure. I'm actually curious if you were at this game for number 2 that I have on my list, because I don't think you were at the network yet, so probably not, but it's 2010. When did you start? 20? What's it? 13? Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah, you mentioned that earlier with MSU's first year, so you wouldn't have been at this at least for BTN, maybe for ESPN. I don't know, but anyway, it's a very memorable game that we show on our air quite a bit. It's the Big Ten tournament, Ohio State, Michigan, Evan Turner shot game. Just being there.
But that's a good.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't remember much about the game. I don't even know if I was there for the whole game, because we, as me and my, I think dad and grandpa, maybe my brother, we went to get there early for, I think Illinois played after then. We were sitting right behind Evan Turner's family, and can't remember how long or how deep into the game we arrived, but I think Manny Harris had a big play late, and then that was the Stu Douglas and Zach Novak Michigan team, and Evan Turner just ripped their soul out with that 40-footer. So just being there for that was cool. Having to sit right behind Evan Turner's family was cool, and it's something that you see the replay of once in a while, and like, oh yeah, I was there. So
Yeah, that's an awesome moment to be at. Yeah, I haven't been at a buzzer beater in person, so that would definitely be an awesome one to get to. I want to say I was in Charlotte actually, helping out with ESPNU like championship week coverage, and so I remember just kind of watching on TV, like, oh man, like Michigan's actually gonna win this game. Like, it's gonna be crazy. And then he hits that, like the newsroom down there goes crazy. And I'm just like, wow, like, and it showed that he was the player of the year for a reason, and he acted like he had been there before. I don't know how you can act like that after hitting a half court shot to beat your rival in a tournament, but he was that cool, that calm, that collected all year, and he was a reason why he was National Player of the Year, and they won as much as they did.
yeah, another one that didn't quite make the cut, but was that for the Big Ten tournament, the Cam Chapman shot.
Yeah,
that was a good one too, and that was another close to buzzer beater that I was at, but did not make the list, but fun nonetheless. Same building too in Indy. So, what do you got for number two?
Number two for me is the 2009 Final Four against UConn. Just that particular game. So the other two games were absolutely awful. Carolina Villanova and Carolina Michigan State. But the UConn game was one of those where, trying to find parking was ridiculous to begin with. It's the first time I can remember as a Michigan State fan, like the city being green, because growing up here, it is a very maize and blue area. And so seeing like everything downtown be Michigan State was kind of surreal. Finally got in the building. The UConn kind of had a lead for a little while. They start to, Michigan State starts to come back, starts to pull away a little bit in the second half. And I remember the Darrell Summers dunk over Stanley Robinson. And, I didn't know it at the time because I'm there, but I remember like everybody's jumping around. It was just super, super loud. And when I go home and watch it on TV, like Jim Nantz is like, Ford Field is literally shaking. It's like, yeah, like it felt like it when I was there. And so again, for me, when I'm at a live event, I always remember like the energy more than anything else. And so like when that happened and that place goes crazy, like I definitely remember that. And the final moment, I want to say Izzo drew up a play out of the timeout late and led to like a dunk or a layup or something. And I was kind of close to the Michigan State bench, but obviously like rose up. But I remember like the play worked and it kind of extended the lead, and he dropped his clipboard down like a boss, like, yep, got that one. And so like I remember those two. I was like, okay, now what do I do? Like it's 8:00. And it was weird because everybody left for the Carolina Villanova game. It felt like the noon Thursday first round, like barely anybody there because everybody just went to go celebrate. And I stayed for about a half and saw the game get out of hand, and I was like, all right, well, whatever. So, yeah, that game was awesome.
Yeah, CBS Sports did had a tweet this week, one of those kind of topical tweets that they try and get people to respond or quote tweet it with their answers. And this one was what's like the best we're gonna win moment you can remember, and it sounds like you had a couple there. And it's one of those unique feelings in sports when you kind of realize that your team's got it, even if you don't fully believe it. So yeah, I don't have a Final Four game on there, but I do remember when I realized that Illinois was going to beat Louisville in the national semifinal, the Final Four, and it was weird because Louisville, they weren't down that much. They were down maybe 12 with 3 minutes left or a few minutes left, and they didn't foul. Pitino called off the dogs, and you realize, all right, they're going to win. And similar to what you said about Spartan fans, like Illinois fans kind of took over St. Louis, and they traveled really well. As they do when their teams are good. Like some people don't believe me when I say, like, if they ever get to Indy for football, like it'll be 70 or 80% Illinois fans. And then that's how it was for basketball, except even more, lopsided in that tournament final. But that's always fun to see, especially when you kind of know that your team is gonna get the job done. And I know you said you had not had a buzzer beater on there yet, but my number one is also a buzzer beater. So 2 in a row. And it's the 2013 Illinois win over number one Indiana. You're smiling like you knew that I might have that on there. Right. And that season was an interesting one. John Gross's first year. It was also my first year as a college student. So kind of rode the roller coaster with that team. And they had some really big early season wins. They beat a great Gonzaga team, won the Maui Invitational as well. And then they really fell off hard until this Indiana game kind of brought them back, and they ended up finishing the season in decent fashion. But this is the one that I thought was maybe like the start of a cool 4 years and really ended up being the peak. Um, they didn't go back to the tournament after that while I was in school, but at the very least, I got a moment where you beat a number one team, you have a buzzer beater, you storm the court. It's kind of all the ingredients of the college sports experience you hope for when you go to a Big Ten school. So had to have that on there. Can remember the last few plays. Remember Victor Oladipo blocking what would have been the game-winning layup to give them zero point 0.8 seconds or whatever it was, and then Tyler Griffey ended up beating that number one Indiana team. Probably the second biggest disappointment for that Indiana team outside of failing to crack that Syracuse zone that year. So in the NCAA tournament. So that one had to be number one for me just because of all the kind of, things that you won't be able to recapture that culminated in that experience. Like I'm never rushing a college basketball court again. We'll probably see very few number one teams go down to the buzzer. Like it's just something that is unique. So I had to have it.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been shocked if you didn't. The only thing would have been if you weren't actually there, and then I could see it. But I definitely figured that was a game that was high on a lot of Illinois fans' list. And that Indiana team was loaded. I mean, you mentioned they were number one. That was a loaded Big Ten in general, and they won it outright. But it showed the depth of the league that Illinois can go and do that. And I still think, when you mentioned the peak, like I remember Illinois, they should have beat Miami in the tournament that year, and then who knows what happens after that. But fell a little short. Yeah, that team was a lot of fun. Brandon Paul, I remember him hitting a big shot in the Big Ten tournament at the buzzer that year. That Illinois team was really good.
Yeah, great Big Ten year. Like you said, and it was before I really did anything in media seriously. I was a freshman, so it's like one of those last kind of pure fan things, because I was working the games and writing about basketball and everything later on, but you kind of have no worries when you're a college student like that. So I remember, that was the only time also after the game on campus, it was a Thursday night, everyone was out and in good spirits and all that. And it's the only time I saw anything like that was on Instagram this year after they beat Ohio State. They were storming the main street like they had won, or like they were going to the Final Four. And on one hand, I'm glad they got that experience because they did fall short in the actual tournament and didn't get to have a moment of celebration. So just that college student experience, like you referenced, being in the stands, the pandemonium you referenced, is something that I'm gonna be glad to see back in the stands this fall.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, the fan energy is something that I think I wound up missing more than I thought I would.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll definitely be glad when that's back.
Yeah, college football I think suffered the most, no question, out of all the sports. But anyway, don't want to delay the reveal here for you. What's your number one basketball?
I'm actually going 2015 Final Four for two reasons. Well, actually, I guess multiple. But the first being, it was a rare time where Michigan State got there and it shouldn't have. That was a team that was a 7 seed, and you got the loaded Duke, the loaded Kentucky, loaded Wisconsin, and it's 7 seed Michigan State got there. That's weird. But just from a personal level, it was the first time I had actually gone as a media member. I usually try to find a way to get there if Michigan State is there, but it was the first time I actually got to go as a media member, so that was cool. That team will always have an emotional attachment for me because I remember they were really struggling around the time that my dad was struggling with his health, and after he passed, they went on this run and got to the Final Four. So that team will always stay with me, no matter what. They'll probably be my favorite Michigan State team, no matter what. So just seeing them there and seeing the JW Marriott with the big the big picture of them and the big picture of Travis Trice and all that was cool. And then seeing, the heavyweight fight that everybody wanted to see, Wisconsin, Kentucky. After what happened the year before, Wisconsin was clearly better than them, but lost on a big shot late. And Wisconsin, most people thought was the only team that could beat Kentucky. And, Sam Dekker hits the shot, as we talked about at the top of the show. And you could just see the Kentucky players, like, they weren't ready for the loss, like the multiple shot clock violations. And I remember the Wisconsin crowd going crazy and jump around being played at obscene levels in the stadium. And the Kentucky fans just looking so confused as to what happened. And I remember leaving the arena, and I mean, it's just droves of Kentucky fans just getting out of town, just getting out of the city, like not staying. The heck with this, we're out of here. And I remember Monday night sounded like Camp Randall. It really did. And I thought they win, but some officiating here and there, and Tyus Jones took over late. But seeing a momentous occasion with an undefeated team going down, seeing a huge upset like that, and then seeing 2-1 seeds go at it for the title. We haven't seen that as much recently, so being able to be there in person for all that was really cool.
Yeah. Another, memory of two Big Ten teams in the Final Four. I still remember like vividly when after Illinois beat Louisville, Michigan State played North Carolina, and Illinois fans throughout that evening were, chanting "Go Green, Go White." They were giving the ILL, I back, and just, you remember those things, and it's fun to have two teams in the Final Four, obviously. All right, H, that was really fun. As I expected, like memories come out, and we had some really good extended conversations. Real quick, we did talk about having some miscellaneous things on our list. I can run through my just top 5 miscellaneous sporting events that I recall going to, and I probably left some out, but like going back, like I didn't grow up going to a whole lot of pro games, or a whole lot of like I've been to, I think, one playoff game, and it was a Cubs one where they lost to the Rockies. So like I talked to people who like grew up going to playoff games with their families, or like went to the World Series in 2016 with the Cubs. Like that was never really me. I was like strictly college sports for the most part, but I did have some on here. So one, actually, you were at. I thought the MN UFC game was really fun. The MLS game we went to back in 2019, the bus tour. I thought you might appreciate that.
That was fun. I had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I don't think I've been to another soccer game besides that, but it was sold out. It was in St. Paul. We had a day off while we were visiting Minneapolis and Minnesota football, but we went to the soccer game, and I think, I don't even know who won, but I think Minnesota scored late. And it was just one of those things where you could tell the culture had been established there. It's a fun experience, even if you don't like or don't understand soccer. I do like soccer in doses, and I'm getting more into it. And a game like that also like helps me expand my fandom for sure, because it was a blast. And like the crowd had their choreographed chants, and you could tell they took it seriously. And it's an experience I hope they can kind of cultivate here with the Chicago Fire, because them out in the suburbs, I know it's been hard to get a lot of traction, but moving to Soldier Field could help that. And just having, a short light rail ride away out there in St. Paul, I think was a really easy, fun experience for us. And we just kind of got to take it all in.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny you did have that game on there. I didn't, but I could see why you put it on there. And I think it helped. Like, it was a new stadium. It was small, so it was got an intimate setting. So it was easy to kind of get wrapped up in, like, the pageantry and, the chanting, and, it was a really cool experience for like my first like soccer game.
Yeah, I really want to go to like a Premier League game or some sort of big international soccer game. I'm sure I'll have to open my wallet quite a bit for that. But all right, real quick, the other ones I had, 2019 Auburn, Virginia Final Four. Quick funny story. This one, I was behind the Auburn student section, and I believe it was Kyle Guy or whoever it was that got fouled. Everyone thought that the game was over and that Auburn had won, including the Auburn student section. So there's a kid down on the floor who turns around yelling, celebrating, and dumps his entire beer on his head, and then gets thrown out of US Bank Stadium in Minnesota for doing that. And not only did he not realize that the game was not over and that Virginia was about to win, he had to, take the walk of shame out of the building. So that was crazy. That was just like a crazy game, and nobody really knew in the football stadium what was going on with that call, but it ended up being just a wild game. So, and then of course your Spartans lost shortly after that.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about funny stories. So I was there as a fan. Me and my wife went. I think it was her first Final Four, so I know she had a lot of fun with that. I remember, and it's funny because I remember the Auburn Virginia craziness, and usually I never stay for the title game if I'm a fan and Michigan State lost. Like I'd rather not be there and get all upset or whatever. So you know what? Let me sell my ticket, get some of the money back. So I've missed Illinois, North Carolina, Butler, Duke, and Texas Tech, Virginia. Like 3 great classic type games because I didn't want any part of that stadium, knowing that Michigan State could have been there at least 2 of the times, maybe all 3. I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to deal with, staying another night in the city and all that stuff. Get me out of here. I'm out. And so could have saw all 3, and those probably would have been on my list. But instead, I sold tickets for all 3 of them. And so it took me a little while to figure out what I wanted to put on here.
Yeah, I still regret not staying as well for that Virginia Texas Tech game. I flew home on Monday and watched it on TV, and I was like, well, I probably should have hung around just like I had the media pass, I might as well have stayed. But yeah, and then just a couple of random ones. This one's kind of funny. Like I haven't been to that many NFL games, but Bears Steelers in 2017 was funny, and a great game. Bears beat a really good Steelers team. I think Steelers went like 13-3 that year. It was what is known as the Mike Glennon game. So early in the season, it was like 100 degrees, but luckily we were in one of the sky boxes, and somehow the Bears, led by Mike Glennon, beat a really good Steelers team in a really actually thrilling game. And then I've been to 2 walk-off Grand Slam games. Jason Hayward had a walk-off granny against the Phillies in 2018, and it was my buddy's birthday who I was with, and he's like the biggest Cubs fan I know. Only doesn't watch any other sports besides Cubs baseball, so I knew it meant a lot to him. So I was glad to be there for that. And then 2014, we had like a school trip, a college school student trip to the Rays, White Sox, and Jose Abreu hit a walk-off grand slam. So no hitters, nothing crazy, but being at 2 walk-off grand slams is I'll take that. 27 years in, still haven't caught a foul ball though, so that's another thing on my list.
No, those are definitely some good moments, and I'm glad you mentioned the NFL one because I'm thinking like I hadn't really been in any Lions games, and I was like, oh wait, I did. It was the 2011 Lions Chargers game. I got tickets from a friend, and it was like when they had clinched the playoff or they killed the Chargers. I think it was like a CBS game, and like I remember because again the Lions are bad and they've been bad for so long. Man, it was a huge deal. They're like, oh, they clinched a playoff spot. Like people are like chanting like play like as teams who don't win a lot, like they have to find something to cheer for. So like I remember just that place being crazy. They're like, oh, we're going to playoffs. Oh my God, this is so awesome. So I probably would have put that on my original list. I didn't have it, but I'm glad you reminded me of that with your football reference. I was actually an usher at Comerica Park when I was in college. And so like I come home for the summers and stuff. And of course, the year that I stopped being an usher is the year they surprised everybody and go to the World Series. But before that, the All-Star game was in Detroit. And so I got to see the All-Star game in 2005, which was really cool, and the home run derby. And for whatever reason, like Pudge Rodriguez was in it and like went crazy and got to the final. I think that was the Bobby Abreu hit like 1 million home runs or whatever that year. But it was just again for me the energy, and I remember like everybody was like going crazy that Pudge went on this run. And it's always fun when you like root for your hometown player in a setting like that. So I had those 2 on there, and probably the most painful one for sure is the 2005 NBA Finals Game 5. Still don't know why they left Robert Horry open, but he hit the 3. We're probably 3 rows from the top. It's late. It's Sunday. And me and my buddies win. It was like 3 of us total. And I remember we're just sitting there, and we're like, how'd that happen? Like, they win that game, they're probably gonna split and go back to back. And like the ushers had to be like, dude, like you gotta go, you gotta get out of here. And like I just remember still like being upset to this day that they could have won back to back. They didn't, likely because of that moment. But I remember the game like being super tense, super awesome. And that was kind of the last like Pistons game I've been to. It might have been the last Pistons game I went to of like any significance. So that one stuck out for sure.
Yeah, definitely memorable. And you reminded me with the conversation. I knew this would happen as we kind of talked, that things would pop up. I've been to 2 All-Star events in pro sports. Worked the MLB All-Star game in 2014 in Minnesota. A lot of Minneapolis sports memories on here for me. But that was really cool, just seeing an MLB All-Star weekend. Got to go to all the events, and we like did a school project and kind of worked it to help MLB out. And then worked, I could put in quotes here, covered the NBA All-Star game when it came to Chicago last year, and went to the Saturday night festivities, like dunk contest, 3-point, and Friday night, the Rising Stars, which was cool to see like Zion and those guys, John Morant play. Got to go for Big Ten Network and talk to some guys like Duncan Robinson, Miles Bridges, Jaren Jackson. So that was really cool. Now I look back on it, it should be up in my list, but just something that I'm glad was able to kind of intersect with our professional lives. But a lot of good memories on here. I don't know if you have anything else, but we went forever, but it felt like, a blink, because I love reflecting on stuff like this, humble bragging about where we've been, even though, some of these aren't that impressive. Like some people I'm sure can throw their Super Bowl experience on there, whatever. Like these are the ones that are sentimental to us, and had fun doing it.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the only one that was missing from my original list, and shout out to my dad, because I've been to a lot of Final Fours for whatever reason, and I know a lot of people don't get to them. But we were at the 2003 national championship game, the Carmelo year, and I remember we drove from Detroit to New Orleans because we went with a lot.
You broke up for a second, Age. Wait, just repeat the game. We had the rest of it.
I was the 2003 national champion, 2003 Final Four. So
gotcha.
The Syracuse, Kansas, Carmelo here. For whatever reason, we drove. My dad got tickets through like buddies of his, and so we all went down there. I'm 19 at the time, so I can't really get into New Orleans stuff like I want to. But I remember having like a Bloody Mary down there with him and stuff, and we drove from Detroit to New Orleans. It was like 18 hours. And it's in the Superdome. We're way up, but you kind of remember, Carmelo going crazy and Jerry McNamara going crazy, and the big Hakeem Ward block late. And it's kind of funny looking back because, this was right around the time of, man, who should be the number 1 pick? Should it be LeBron or should it be Carmelo? And like, you see Carmelo doing this thing, and you're like, this dude seems like he should be number 1. And like, I remember like a bunch of people around us were saying it. And, I think Syracuse had played Michigan State earlier that year at Breslin, and he went crazy, and Syracuse won by like 1 or 2 or something like that. And I'm thinking like, I could see Carmelo going 1, like that would make sense. Clearly Cleveland made the right pick, but this is kind of funny. Like when you look back and kind of relive some of that stuff, you remember some of the conversations that go on, and you're like, it's funny how that worked out.
Yeah, awesome story, and incredible game to be at. I still remember vaguely blurry, watching that national championship. So, and a cool sentimental story with your pops too. So, awesome stuff, H. Really appreciate you sharing, those memories, and hopefully people stuck with us throughout, and kind of reflect on some of those and their own personal memories. So, always fun to do this. Appreciate you jumping on, and we'll think of something fun to talk about next time.
All right, sounds good. It's always fun to do this.
All right, thanks once again to Harold and Olivia for joining the show. Really appreciate both of them in what was a very long episode, like I said, but hopefully it was fun to listen to. A lot of fun talking with both of them and sharing stories, experiences, and insights. Thanks again to both of them. Thanks as always to our producer. I was going to say Julie Bronder, but she's out this week. So Wes White stitching the show together, filling in, pinch hitting. Thanks, Wes. And thanks again to everyone for listening. I want to remind listeners who are here for the first time or have not subscribed yet to please do so. Subscribe. We're available on major podcast platforms, your Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and we are on YouTube as well. You can see these interviews in their entirety on the Big Ten Network YouTube channel. Just search Take 10 Podcast. We have a playlist that you can follow. Once you subscribe to that Big Ten Network YouTube channel, you can easily find us and the episodes that we'll be releasing here and going forward. So thanks as always to everyone for listening. And as we continue to move through the summer, we'll continue to drop episodes, and we'll talk to you very soon here on the Take 10 Podcast.